About 12 years ago, I had an abortion. Not the I'm pregnant and don't want to be kind, which, for the record, I am in full support of. But the kind that's I'm pregnant and I do want to be. When I was growing up, sex ed focused on how not to get pregnant. Sex is fun. Getting pregnant with penis and vagina sex is easy. Use protection. In my early 30s, friend after friend started having babies. And I looked on longingly from the sidelines. Despite my biological clock ringing off the hook, my husband and I weren't quite ready to add to our family. We had just moved to California and were in the middle of career changes. Everyone said there was no perfect time to have a baby, but when I was almost 35, the age at which OBGYNs start calling you geriatric, we decided to start trying. Everyone I knew had remarked on how easy getting pregnant was, so I half expected my husband to just wink at me, and I'd be on my merry way to being a mum. To maximize our chances, I bought a thermometer with 2 decimal places so I could track my post-ovulation temperature. And then, with a wham, bam, come to mama moment, I was knocked up on the first try. I intuitively knew because 10 days later I smelled Old Spice, my dead grandfather's aftershave, and heard his voice far away in my ear, like a voiceover in a black and white movie tell me, "It's a boy." 2 pink lines on a home pregnancy test confirmed what I instinctively already knew. I was pregnant. It had been so easy. Those sex ed teachers were right. For a blissful month, I floated around, all aglow. I could feel a fizzing in my uterus, like a tiny sparkler waving around. Grow, little bean, grow. I cheered on the blob of cells. I wasn't ready to call it a baby, so I called it Bean. I wondered what kind of mother I'd be. And that seemed too abstract. So I tried to imagine Bean as a toddler, a boy with a mop of dark curls, running around a house strewn with toys. I could envisage the chaos of the boy, but not his face. That's when I realized the fizzing had stopped. My uterus was quiet, like a shipwreck at the bottom of the ocean. The silence was unnerving. Something is wrong, my intuition urged. Uneasy, I called the clinic where I was due to have my first prenatal checkup 18 days later. Something's wrong, I explained. I'm worried. The triage nurse asked, "Are you bleeding?" "Well, no," I said, suddenly doubting myself. "Are you cramping?" I replied, "No, actually it's the opposite." "Opposite?" I could tell she was mystified. "Yeah, like I had these sensations of stretching and growing and they've stopped." "Huh," said the nurse. "Well, if you don't have any symptoms, I wouldn't worry. It's just first-time nerves, honey. We'll see you February 26th. I tried to feel reassured. I didn't think it was first-time nerves, but figured a labour and delivery nurse would know better than I. I counted off the 18 days until February 26th rolled around. On the day of the appointment, I was supposed to be 8.5 weeks pregnant. I opened a pregnancy book my friend Evelyn had sent me. As I flipped through the pages, out fell an ultrasound photo from Evelyn's pregnancy with her son. I picked up the thermal paper. She had been 8.5 weeks pregnant, same as me. I studied the image of Evelyn's son as an embryo. A giant white kidney bean with a beady black eye stared back at me. By the time I arrived at my appointment, there was still no more fizzing, but the cheerful "Congratulations, Mom," from Caroline, the nurse practitioner, briefly gave me hope. I held my breath as Caroline squirted cold blue gel on my belly. As the contents of my lower abdomen swam into view, it was obvious there was no giant kidney bean of my own, just a small, motionless white blob floating in the darkness. Caroline muttered something about a missed miscarriage. I was supposed to be 8.5 weeks pregnant, but there was an 18-day discrepancy. Bean had stopped growing at 5 weeks and 6 days. Yeah, on the day I thought something was wrong. But my stupid body had decided to continue the pregnancy anyway. My husband and I squeezed hands. Caroline's attitude shifted. We'd gone from expectant parents-to-be to an unfortunate statistic. As Caroline wiped the ultrasound jelly off my belly and pulled up my underwear, she'd said I'd need to take misoprostol, a medication to kickstart the miscarriage process. The actual miscarrying part, she said, was like a heavy period. That, as anyone who has actually miscarried or had an abortion knows, is a bold-faced fucking lie. Bean had been worthy of congratulations before, but was now relegated to products of conception. I sat up, feeling naked underneath my green hospital gown, and stared at the floor. Maybe Caroline was regretting calling me Mom, because it seemed like she couldn't wait to get out of that room. Take your time, she offered in a tone I imagined she thought was compassionate. To do what? I seethed silently, but with my British stiff upper lip in crisis mode activated. Instead, I whispered, "Okay, thanks for your help." 2 doses of misoprostol and an outpatient surgical procedure later, I had officially terminated my pregnancy. With the physical part of miscarriage over, grief began to unbutton herself. My focus turned to the mental and spiritual anguish. I blamed my body for continuing a doomed pregnancy. I blamed the fucked up chromosomes that had presumably made Bean incompatible with life. I wept for the imagined child I had lost. I mourned the house strewn with his toys, the soft curls I would never twirl around my fingers, the face I would never see. I was intensely jealous of my friends, some of whom by now were on their 2nd and 3rd children. Pregnancy announcements felt like an ambush. And when I started seeing pregnant bellies while out and about, all I could think was, that's what I should have looked like by now. I developed a form of reproductive PTSD. Because despite our best efforts for most of spring and all of summer, I still wasn't pregnant again. I was referred to a reproductive endocrinologist or fertility doctor. Dr. Dudek was a tall man with kind eyes above a square overbite, who, after a series of tests that looked at my ovaries and uterus, recommended IVF. In California, before you can proceed with IVF, you go through a standard battery of blood tests to screen for infectious diseases. But Dr. Dudek added a couple of genetic tests. He had homed in on my eggs. He was puzzled by why I, despite being in my mid-30s, hardly had any left. At the end of April each year, Resolve, the National Infertility Organization, puts on National Infertility Awareness Week to support infertile people and educate others. Miscarriage affects 1 in 4 people. Infertility affects 1 in 8. Statistics become hashtags. I am hashtag 1 in 4. I am hashtag 1 in 8. And I was sick of falling into smaller and smaller odds. Imagine my shock then when my genetic test results came back. A chromosome disorder so rare there are only 50 known families worldwide who have it. I am a spontaneous mutation. Mother Nature's experiment gone wrong. I am hashtag 1 in 8 billion. Put simply, if you imagine I'm a book, all my pages are back to front and upside down. You could read me, but it wouldn't be fun or easy. Put another way, I get pregnant, but I don't stay pregnant. IVF with my own eggs would be a complete waste of time. Or another, Bean got his fucked up chromosomes from me. It was my fault. Our options were remain childless or pursue parenthood through adoption or egg donation. If you had told me back on February 26th, 2013, the day I learned I would miscarry, that I wouldn't be pregnant again until the following February 26th, but this time with another woman's eggs, I think I would have screamed. But over the course of that year, I made peace with my body. It wasn't stupid for continuing a doomed pregnancy. I reframed it as, my body is good at being pregnant even when there is no hope. Bean wasn't the end of a chapter, but a new one. My husband and I decided to remove my DNA from the equation, replacing my shitty eggs with someone else's grade A clutch. So on the day of my donor egg IVF transfer, exactly 1 year to the day of that first awful ultrasound, I was hopeful I would be a mum. Funny thing was, exactly a year to the day I had the surgical abortion was the day I learned I was pregnant with my daughter. And 4 years later, also on February 26th, we transferred 2 embryos that are now my twin son and daughter. Thanks. February 26th is a date that connects all my children. The genetic child that, thanks to my own eggs, never stood a chance, but whose legacy brought me my living children. A trio of redheads who make me laugh, give me white hairs, and demand more food than I think could possibly fit in their small, wriggly bodies. I thank my egg donor daily for helping me give life to the most fascinating creatures I've ever met. So I rarely think of Bean, but when I do, I thank him for showing me what was possible. Because although my miscarriage was the first time my heart was ever broken, I can be grateful to Bean for putting me on this path to parenthood. And I can also be grateful for my fucked up chromosome, because it gave me the little egg that couldn't, but somehow did.
Give it up for Lauren Cross.